The cleaner whispered to the doctor, "Don't do this surgery." What he did surprised everyone. Sarah Miller took a deep breath before approaching Dr. Michael Carter in the hallway of Mercy General Hospital. Her hands trembled as she clutched the cleaning rag, and her heart pounded so loudly she was sure he could hear it. The doctor was hurrying toward the operating room, his white coat immaculate, and his glasses reflecting the overhead lights. "Dr. Carter," she called softly. He stopped and turned, surprised to see the cleaner who always greeted him politely in the hallways. Sarah wore her usual light blue uniform with a blue headband holding back her brown hair, and there was something different in her dark eyes at that moment. "Yes, Sarah?" Michael adjusted his glasses, noticing the tension in her face. She glanced around, making sure no one was listening, and stepped closer to him. With her free hand, she gestured discreetly for him to lean in as if sharing a secret. "Doctor, don't do this surgery," she whispered, her voice urgent. Michael's eyes widened behind his glasses, his mouth falling open in shock. For a moment he was speechless, processing what he'd just heard. "What do you mean? Which surgery are you talking about?" he asked, instinctively lowering his voice. "The surgery for Mrs. Eleanor Thompson, room 3. Don't do it, doctor. For the love of God, don't." A chill ran down the doctor's spine. Eleanor Thompson was exactly the patient he was about to operate on, a gallbladder surgery scheduled weeks ago. How could a cleaner know details about his procedures? "Sarah, you can't just—" he began, but she cut him off. "Doctor, I know you have no reason to trust me. I'm just the cleaner. But please, trust me. Don't do this surgery today." Michael glanced at his wristwatch. He had only 15 minutes before entering the operating room. His team was already prepping, the patient being anesthetized, and here was a cleaner asking him not to do his job. "Sarah, I have to go. Mrs. Thompson is waiting and—" "She doesn't need this surgery," Sarah interrupted again, her voice firmer. "And if you do it, you'll regret it for the rest of your life." The doctor's legs felt weak. There was something in Sarah's voice, a certainty that left him completely unsettled. He'd known her for 3 years, ever since she started working at the hospital. She'd always been a quiet, polite woman who did her job without interference. She'd never meddled in medical matters. "How can you be so sure?" he asked, his voice quieter than he intended. Sarah looked around again and sighed deeply. "Doctor, I overheard a conversation I wasn't supposed to hear, between Dr. Richard Wilson and someone on the phone. About Mrs. Thompson." The name Dr. Richard Wilson made Michael's stomach knot. Richard was the head of the surgery department, a respected man but known for being extremely ambitious and sometimes unethical in his decisions. "What kind of conversation?" Michael asked, though part of him didn't want to know the answer. "He was in his office late at night. I was cleaning the hallway and heard him saying how Mrs. Thompson's surgery was unnecessary but would bring in a lot of money for the hospital, and that you were too new to question it." The world seemed to spin around Michael. Over the past few months, he'd begun suspecting that some surgeries were being scheduled without real need, but he'd never dared to confront Richard directly. As a newly graduated doctor, he was still building his career and didn't want to make enemies. "Sarah, this is a very serious accusation," he said, his voice trembling. "I know, doctor, and I know it's my word against his, but I can't stay silent knowing an innocent person is about to undergo unnecessary surgery." At that moment, the head nurse, Nancy, appeared in the hallway. "Dr. Carter, the team is waiting. The patient is already under anesthesia." Michael looked at Sarah, then at Nancy, feeling completely lost. If he cancelled the surgery now, he'd have to give explanations he didn't know how to provide. If he went through with it, he might be harming an innocent patient. "Nancy, I need 5 more minutes," he said. "Doctor, we can't delay. Dr. Wilson has already called twice asking if you've started." Hearing Richard's name mentioned at that moment felt like confirmation of Michael's suspicions. He looked at Sarah, who kept her eyes fixed on him, silently pleading for him to listen. "Nancy, cancel the surgery," Michael said, surprising himself with the firmness in his voice. "What do you mean, doctor?" Nancy's eyes widened. "Cancel it. Say I had a family emergency. Reschedule for next week." Nancy was stunned, but nodded and hurried off. Michael turned to Sarah, who had tears in her eyes. "Thank you, doctor, you did the right thing. Sarah, if you're wrong, my career could be over. And if I'm right, Mrs. Thompson's life could be saved." Michael ran a hand through his hair, feeling the weight of the decision he'd just made. He looked at Sarah, really looked at her for the first time. He noticed the worry lines on her face, the determination in her eyes, and realized there was much more to this woman than he'd imagined. "Sarah, I need to know everything you heard, every detail." "Doctor, I can't talk here. It's too dangerous." "Then where?" "Do you know Mrs. Betty's cafe, around the corner from the hospital?" Michael nodded. It was a small diner where some hospital staff grabbed quick meals. "Meet me there at 7 tonight. I'll tell you everything." Sarah walked away quickly, returning to her work as if nothing had happened. Michael stood in the hallway for a moment, trying to process what he'd just done. Cancelling surgery based on a janitor's word was, at the very least, reckless. But something inside him told him Sarah was telling the truth. 10 minutes later, Michael's phone rang. It was Dr. Wilson. "Michael, what happened? Nancy told me you cancelled Eleanor's surgery." "I had a family emergency, Dr. Wilson. I had to leave immediately." "Family emergency?" Richard's voice sounded suspicious. "What kind of emergency?" "My mother fell ill. She's at the hospital in Newark." Michael hated lying, but he needed time to understand the situation better. "I see. Well, let's reschedule for Tuesday then. Eleanor will stay admitted a few more days anyway." "Sounds good, Dr. Wilson." "Michael, I'm sure you understand how important this surgery is for the department. It's a case that could open many doors for your career." The way Richard said it made Michael even more uneasy. There was an implied pressure he'd never noticed before. "Of course, Dr. Wilson. I understand completely." After hanging up, Michael went straight to Eleanor Thompson's file. She was 68, widowed, childless, and lived alone. She'd been admitted the previous week with abdominal pain. Tests showed some irregularities in her gallbladder, but nothing indicating urgent surgery. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing, Michael studied the test results more carefully than he had before. The images showed small gallstones, but the patient wasn't experiencing severe symptoms. In fact, the pain she felt could be managed with medication and dietary changes. The more he analyzed it, the more he realized Sarah might have been right. Surgery wasn't necessary at that moment. Maybe in the future if the symptoms worsened, but not now. Michael spent the rest of the day restless, thinking about his encounter with Sarah. He could barely focus on his other appointments, and several times caught himself watching her as she passed by, cleaning the hallways. She always avoided his gaze, focused on her work. At exactly 7 in the evening, Michael walked into Mrs. Betty's cafe. It was a simple place with a few Formica tables and the smell of fresh coffee in the air. Sarah was already there, sitting at a table in the back, away from the window. "Doctor," she said, standing as he arrived. "Sit down, Sarah, and you can call me Michael when we're outside the hospital." She nodded, but he could tell she was still tense. Mrs. Betty, a grey-haired woman, brought them 2 coffees without them even ordering. "On the house," she said with a smile. When they were alone, Michael leaned forward. "Now tell me everything, Sarah, from the beginning." Sarah took a deep breath and began her story. "Doctor, Michael, I've worked at the hospital for 3 years. I've always liked my job, even if it's just cleaning. But over the last few months, I've started noticing strange things." "What kind of things?" "Patients who went in for simple surgeries and came out much worse than they went in. Families getting huge bills for procedures that seemed unnecessary. And it was always older patients, the ones without many relatives to question things." A chill ran through Michael's stomach. He'd noticed some odd cases too, but had always chalked it up to his own inexperience. "Go on." "Last week I was cleaning the administrative floor. It was late, almost 10 at night. I thought no one was there, but I saw a light in Dr. Richard's office. When I passed by the door, I heard him on the phone." "What did he say?" "He was talking to someone about numbers, said the hospital was struggling financially and needed to increase revenue. Then he mentioned Mrs. Eleanor. Michael leaned in even closer. What exactly did he say about her? That she was the perfect kind of patient. Elderly, no family, good insurance. Said a gallbladder surgery would bring in at least 100,000 for the hospital, and that there were other similar cases. Other cases? Yes. He mentioned 3 more patients by name. All elderly, all scheduled for surgeries in the next few weeks. Michael's hands went cold. If Sarah was telling the truth, he was in the middle of a medical fraud scheme. Sarah, why did you decide to tell me this? Why not go straight to hospital administration? Because Dr. Richard mentioned your name in the conversation. Michael's heart raced. What did he say about me? That you were young and ambitious. That you'd do any surgery he asked without question, as long as it meant advancing your career. It felt like a punch to the gut. Was that really how Richard saw him? As some naive young doctor who'd do anything to get ahead? And that's why you decided to warn me? Partly, but also because I've seen how you treat patients, with kindness, with respect. I saw you talking to Mrs. Eleanor yesterday, patiently explaining the procedure to her. You're not like the others. What do you mean, like the others? Dr. Michael, I've cleaned that hospital for 3 years. I see everything. I see doctors who treat patients like numbers. I see nurses who ignore call buttons because it's almost quitting time. But you're different. That's why I knew if I told you the truth, you'd do the right thing. Michael remained silent for a few moments, processing everything he had heard. If Sarah was right, he needed to do something. But he also knew that accusing a respected doctor like Richard without concrete evidence could ruin his career. Sarah, I need more information. You mentioned hearing other names? Yes. There's Mr. Walter Jenkins, 72 years old. Prostate surgery scheduled for Thursday. Mrs. Grace Williams, 65, cataract surgery on Friday. And Mr. John Parker, 70, heart surgery next Monday. Michael was familiar with all these cases, and the more he thought about them, the more he realized they could be treated conservatively without surgery. Sarah, I'll look into these cases, but I need your help. How? I need you to keep listening to Dr. Wilson's conversations, but don't put yourself at risk. If he finds out you know something, I understand, I'll be careful. And Sarah, thank you for coming to me. I know it wasn't easy. Doctor, we walk into this hospital every day seeing people who need help. If we don't look out for each other, who will? Michael smiled for the first time that day. There was a simple wisdom in Sarah's words that touched him deeply. They said goodbye in the cafeteria, and Michael went home with his mind racing. He spent the whole night reviewing the medical records of the patients Sarah had mentioned, and his suspicions were confirmed. None of the cases were urgent. All of them could have been treated without surgery. The next morning, Michael arrived at the hospital determined to dig deeper. He discreetly searched for records of patients operated on by Richard over the past few months. What he found alarmed him. There had been a significant increase in surgeries performed by the department, especially on elderly patients. Many cases, when reviewed, didn't justify surgical intervention. Throughout the day, Michael observed Richard more closely. He noticed how he always pushed for more invasive procedures, how he talked about the financial benefits of certain surgeries, and how he treated older patients with condescension. In the afternoon, Michael ran into Sarah in the hallway. "Any updates?" he asked quietly. "Earlier today, Dr. Wilson had a visitor, a man in a suit I didn't recognize. They were in his office for almost an hour. Did you hear anything?" "Just a few words. They talked about quotas and targets, and about a special bonus for hitting certain numbers." Michael's stomach turned. A bonus system based on surgery numbers would explain a lot. "Sarah, I need to speak to someone in hospital administration, but I need more proof." "Doctor, I have an idea, but it's risky." "What idea?" "I could try to record one of Dr. Wilson's conversations." "Sarah, that's too dangerous. If he finds out..." "I know. But think about the patients, Doctor. Mrs. Eleanor, Mr. Walter, all the others." Michael knew she was right, but the thought of putting her at risk made him uneasy. "Let's think of another way," he said. That night, Michael decided to do deeper research. He accessed the surgery department's financial records and discovered revenue had increased by 40% in the last 6 months, while other departments remained stable. He also looked up Dr. Wilson online and found some troubling information. He had worked at 2 other hospitals before, and at both, there had been questions about his practices, though he'd never been formally accused. The next day, Michael made a decision. He went to see Dr. Elizabeth Anderson, the hospital's clinical director. She was a 55-year-old woman, known for her integrity and always putting patients' well-being first. "Dr. Michael, it's good to see you. Please, have a seat. How can I help you?" "Doctor, Elizabeth, I need to talk about something very serious. It's related to questionable practices in the surgery department." The director's face turned serious immediately. "What kind of practices?" Michael shared everything he had discovered, including Sarah's information, though he left out her name for safety. He talked about the unnecessary cases, the suspicious conversations, and the abnormal increase in the department's revenue. "Dr. Michael, these are very serious accusations. Dr. Richard is a respected professional." "I understand, Dr. Elizabeth, but the numbers don't lie, and the cases I'm questioning, do you have concrete proof?" "I have the medical records, I have the financial data, but I need more time to consolidate everything." "Dr. Michael, I appreciate your concern for the patients, but you need to understand I can't act on suspicions alone. I need solid evidence. And in the meantime, more patients could be undergoing unnecessary surgeries." "I understand your distress. How about this? You bring me a detailed report with all the questionable cases, along with medical justifications for your suspicions. We'll analyze them one by one." Michael left the meeting frustrated. He knew Dr. Elizabeth was being cautious, but he also knew that with each passing day, more patients were at risk. That afternoon, he discreetly cancelled Mr. Walters' surgery, claiming he wanted to run some additional tests. Richard was far from pleased. "Michael, you've been cancelling a lot of surgeries lately. That's not good for your career or the department." "Dr. Richard, I just want to make sure we're doing what's best for the patients." "Make sure? Michael, I've been performing surgeries for 15 years. Do you think I don't know when a patient needs surgery?" "It's not that, Dr. Richard. It's just that you're being too hesitant. In medicine, sometimes we need to make firm decisions. Patients trust our expertise." "But in Mr. Walter's case, Mr. Walter is 72. If we don't operate now, in 2 years it might be too late. Better safe than sorry." Michael knew Richard was using valid arguments, but there was something in his tone that didn't sound sincere. In the following days, Michael worked intensely on the report for Dr. Elizabeth. He reviewed each case, consulted medical literature, and discreetly spoke with other colleagues. His suspicions were confirmed. Many of the surgeries performed by Richard were questionable. Meanwhile, Sarah continued passing him information. She had found out that Richard received bonuses based on the department's revenue, and that there was pressure from the administration to increase the hospital's income. "Doctor, I found out something else," Sarah said during a quick meeting in the cafe. "What?" "Mrs. Eleanor isn't the only one. There are at least 10 elderly patients currently admitted who are scheduled for surgeries in the coming weeks, all with good insurance or with no close family." "How did you find this out?" "I talked to the other staff, the receptionists, the senior nurses. Everyone's noticing, but no one dares to speak up." "Why won't anyone speak up?" "Because Dr. Richard has a lot of power here. He's fired several people who questioned his decisions. People are afraid of losing their jobs." Michael realized the problem was bigger than he thought. It wasn't just a few questionable cases. It was a systematic pattern of behavior. That week, something happened that changed everything. Mrs. Grace Williams, who was scheduled for cataract surgery, suffered complications during the procedure. Although the surgery had been technically successful, she developed a post-operative infection that kept her hospitalized for 2 more weeks. Michael investigated the case and discovered that the surgery hadn't actually been necessary. Mrs. Grace's cataract was mild and could have been monitored clinically for a few more years. That was the last straw. Michael finalized his report and scheduled another meeting with Dr. Elizabeth. "Dr. Elizabeth, here's the report you requested. I've documented 15 cases of questionable surgeries performed over the last 3 months. The director took the report and began flipping through it. Her expression grew increasingly serious as she read. Dr. Michael, if this is true. It is true, Dr. Elizabeth, and there's more. I've uncovered a bonus system based on billing that may be incentivizing these practices. What bonus system? Department heads receive percentages based on revenue generated. The more surgeries, the bigger the bonus. Dr. Elizabeth closed the report and fell silent for a moment. Dr. Michael, I'll look into this. But you must understand that this kind of situation requires great care. If we make unfounded accusations, and if we do nothing, more patients will suffer. I understand your position. I'll speak discreetly with some board members. In the meantime, I ask that you continue documenting any irregularities you observe. Michael left the meeting with mixed feelings. On one hand, he knew he'd taken an important first step. On the other, he feared the investigation would take too long. That afternoon, he ran into Sarah in the hospital parking lot. Doctor, I need to speak with you. It's urgent. What happened? Dr. Richard suspects something. This morning, he called several cleaning staff into a meeting. He said there were people spreading rumors about the department and that it was unacceptable. Michael felt a chill down his spine. Did he mention anything specific? No, but the way he looked at me. Doctor, I think he knows I know something. Sarah, you need to be very careful. If he suspects, I know, Doctor. But I also know I can't stop now. Too many lives depend on this. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. In the days that followed, the tension in the hospital grew noticeably. Richard seemed to be watching Michael's every move, questioning every decision, every cancelled surgery. In turn, Michael felt constantly under surveillance. The situation became even more complicated when Michael learned that 2 new young doctors had been hired for the surgery department. Both seemed eager to please Richard and never questioned any of his decisions. Dr. Michael, Richard said during a department meeting, I'd like to introduce our new colleagues, Dr. Brian Miller and Dr. Philip Stone. They'll help boost our productivity. The word productivity struck Michael as odd in a medical context. Medicine should be about care, not productivity. After the meeting, Richard pulled Michael aside. Michael, I've noticed you've been reluctant to perform certain surgeries. It's affecting the department's numbers. Dr. Richard, I just want to ensure we're doing what's best for the patients. Of course we all do, but you must understand this is a private hospital. We need to stay financially viable to keep helping people. I understand that, but Michael, you're a good doctor, but you're still young. Sometimes experience teaches us that tough decisions must be made. We can't always wait for the perfect situation. Doctor. Richard, are you suggesting that I operate on patients who don't need surgery? I'm suggesting you stop questioning so much and trust the experience of those who've been doing this longer. Michael left the conversation, even more convinced his suspicions were correct. Richard hadn't denied it outright, but his words were clearly pressure to stop raising questions. That night, Michael received an unexpected call at home. It was Dr. Elizabeth Anderson. Dr. Michael, I need to speak with you urgently. Can you come to my office tomorrow morning before your shift starts? Of course, Dr. Elizabeth. Did something happen? I'd rather discuss it in person. Come at 7. Michael spent the night awake, wondering what the director might have uncovered. He arrived at the hospital the next morning with a knot in his stomach. Dr. Michael, have a seat, said Dr. Elizabeth, her expression serious. I looked into the information from your report. And? I found significant irregularities. The numbers don't add up. Surgical criteria are questionable in many cases. And there's indeed a bonus system that could be influencing medical decisions. Michael felt immense relief. So, you'll take action? I will, but I need more evidence, specifically recordings or documents proving there's deliberate intent to perform unnecessary surgeries. Dr. Elizabeth, I have a source who might help with that, but I need assurance they'll be protected. What kind of source? An employee who overheard incriminating conversations, but she's at risk if discovered. Dr. Michael, if she can provide concrete evidence, I can guarantee her protection. If necessary, I can even transfer her to another department. Michael thought of Sarah. He knew she was willing to take the risk, but also understood the consequences could be severe. I'll talk to her. But Dr. Elizabeth, what about the patients already scheduled for surgery? For now, proceed as usual. Question cases you find necessary, but avoid raising unnecessary suspicions. We need more time to build a solid case. Michael left the meeting with mixed feelings. On one hand, he was relieved to have the board's support. On the other, he knew the coming days would be critical and dangerous. He found Sarah later that morning. Sarah, Dr. Elizabeth is willing to investigate formally, but we need more concrete evidence. What kind of evidence? Recordings of Dr. Richards' conversations, documents proving the bonus system, anything that shows deliberate intent. Doctor, I can try to get that, but it'll be very risky. Sarah, I don't want you in danger. Doctor, I think of Mrs. Eleanor, Mr. Walter, all the others. If we don't do something, who will? Michael admired her courage, a janitor willing to risk her job to protect patients she didn't even know personally. All right, but we must be extremely careful. If at any point you feel unsafe, stop immediately. Deal. In the following days, Sarah began her risky mission. She adjusted her cleaning routine to be near Richard's office at strategic times. She borrowed a small recorder from an acquaintance and started documenting conversations. Meanwhile, Michael continued his usual work, but with an added purpose. He collected evidence from every questionable case, meticulously documenting everything. The first recording Sarah managed was partial but already revealed crucial information. Richard was discussing optimizing bed utilization and maximizing returns per patient with someone. Doctor, I got this yesterday, said Sarah, handing the recorder to Michael. It's not very clear, but you can make out some things. Michael listened to the recording several times. Though it wasn't definitive proof, it confirmed that Richard was seeing patients as sources of revenue, not as people in need of care. Sarah, this is a start, but we need something more direct. I know. I'll keep trying. The following week, something happened that nearly ruined everything. Sarah was cleaning near Richard's office when the door unexpectedly opened. She managed to hide the recorder quickly, but Richard saw her there. Sarah, what are you doing here? This isn't your usual cleaning time for this floor. Dr. Wilson, Mrs. Betty asked me to clean here earlier today because of a meeting this afternoon. What meeting? Sarah's heart raced. She had made up the excuse on the spot. I don't know, Doctor. I just know she asked me to clean before 2 in the afternoon. Richard studied her suspiciously for a few seconds. Fine, but be quick. This floor needs to be available. Sarah finished cleaning quickly and left with her legs shaking. That afternoon, she went to find Michael. Doctor, I think he suspects something. He almost caught me with the recorder. Sarah, maybe we should stop for now. No, Doctor. I'm so close to getting something definitive, just a few more days. It's too risky. Doctor, this morning I saw Mrs. Eleanor crying in her room. She's scared about the surgery that was rescheduled for next week. An innocent person, afraid of a procedure that shouldn't even happen. I can't give up now. Michael was moved by Sarah's determination. She wasn't doing this for money or recognition. She was doing it because it was the right thing. All right, but promise me that at the first sign of real danger you stop. I promise. 2 days later, Sarah got the evidence they were looking for. She was cleaning a restroom near Richard's office when she overheard a very clear phone conversation. Yes, I understand perfectly, Richard was saying. The quarterly targets must be met. We have 15 elective surgeries scheduled for the next 2 weeks, all patients with good insurance. There was a pause. Of course they're necessary, or at least I can justify that they are. That's what matters, isn't it? Another pause. Dr. Carter has been a problem. Too many questions. But the new doctors are more aligned with our goals. Sarah nearly dropped her cleaning bucket. That conversation was exactly what they needed. About the bonus, Richard continued. When can I expect payment? 15% of the revenue as agreed. Sarah recorded everything. When Richard hung up, she waited a few minutes before leaving the restroom, pretending to finish cleaning. That afternoon, she met Michael in the parking lot. "Doctor, I got it. I have the proof we needed." Michael listened to the recording with his heart pounding. It was exactly what they needed to prove there was a deliberate scheme for unnecessary surgeries. "Sarah, this is perfect. I'll take it to Dr. Anderson immediately." "Doctor, there's more. In the conversation, he mentioned someone higher up pushing the targets. This might be bigger than we thought." Michael had considered that too. If Richard was taking orders from superiors, the problem could involve the entire hospital administration. "Let's focus on what we can prove now. With this recording, Dr. Anderson can take action." The next day, Michael scheduled an urgent meeting with Dr. Elizabeth Anderson. He brought all the documentation he had gathered, including Sarah's recording. "Dr. Anderson, here's the evidence you asked for." The director listened to the recording with growing shock. "Dr. Michael, this is unacceptable. I'm taking this case straight to the board of directors immediately. What about the patients scheduled for surgery? We'll suspend all elective surgeries by Dr. Wilson until this situation is resolved." "Dr. Elizabeth, there's one more thing. The person who obtained this recording is at risk if they're discovered." "Who is it?" "Sarah Miller from the cleaning staff. I'll make sure she's protected. In fact, I'm promoting her to administrative assistant immediately. She's done a great service for this hospital." Michael felt immense relief. Finally, it seemed justice would be served. "When will the board meet?" "Tomorrow morning. Dr. Carter, I want you there to present your findings." That night, Michael barely slept. The next day, his career could change completely, for better or worse. The following morning, he arrived at the hospital early and sought out Sarah before the meeting. "Sarah, I want you to know Dr. Anderson will protect you. You're being promoted to administrative assistant." "Doctor, I didn't do this for a promotion." "I know, but you deserve it. And you'll be safer away from the cleaning staff." "What about Dr. Wilson?" "He'll be formally investigated, likely suspended until everything is cleared up." "And the patients?" "All questionable surgeries have been suspended. We'll re-evaluate each case individually." Sarah smiled for the first time in weeks. "Thank you, Doctor, for believing in me." "No, thank you, Sarah. You saved many lives." The board meeting was tense. Michael presented all the evidence, including Sarah's recording. The board members were visibly shaken by the revelations. "Dr. Carter," said the board chairman, "these are very serious allegations. If confirmed, they represent a fundamental violation of medical ethics." "I understand, sir, but the evidence is clear. We'll launch a formal investigation immediately. Dr. Wilson will be suspended from his duties until this is resolved." "What about the affected patients?" "Each case will be reviewed by an independent medical panel. If we find any patient was harmed, the hospital will take full responsibility." After the meeting, Michael walked out with a sense of duty fulfilled. It had been a difficult road, but the truth was finally coming to light. Hours later, Richard was officially suspended. Michael watched from a distance as security escorted the doctor to collect his personal belongings from his office. Richard looked furious, but could do nothing. In the following days, the investigation progressed quickly. External auditors were hired to review all surgical cases from the past 2 years. What they found was even worse than Michael had imagined. The scheme wasn't limited to Richard. Other doctors were involved, and the incentive system was part of an institutional policy to boost hospital revenue. The pressure came from the financial leadership itself. "Dr. Carter," Dr. Anderson said in a meeting weeks later, "the investigation has revealed systematic misconduct. At least 30 patients underwent unnecessary surgeries in the past 2 years. That's terrible. But thanks to you and Sarah, we've identified and stopped this scheme. Richard has been terminated and will face disciplinary action by the medical board. Other doctors are also under investigation." "What about the affected patients?" "We're reaching out to all of them. The hospital will cover all treatment costs for any complications related to the unnecessary surgeries." Michael felt relieved, but also saddened that so many had been harmed. "Dr. Anderson, what now? How do we ensure this never happens again?" "We're implementing new protocols. All elective surgeries now require mandatory second opinions, and we completely eliminated the bonus system based on procedure volume. A few weeks later, Michael ran into Sarah at her new post as an administrative assistant. She was helping at the reception desk, wearing a fresh uniform and a smile on her face. "Sarah, how are you adjusting to the new role?" "Very well, doctor. It's different, but I'm enjoying it. And the best part is knowing we helped protect so many people." "You were the real hero in this story, Sarah." "No, doctor, we were a team. You could have ignored what I said, but you chose to investigate. That made all the difference." Michael reflected on those words. It was true. He could have simply dismissed Sarah that first day. After all, she was just a cleaner. But something in him recognized that woman's sincerity and courage. "Sarah, can I ask you a personal question?" "Of course." "Why did you take such a risk? You could have lost your job, gotten into serious trouble." Sarah thought for a moment before answering. "Doctor, I grew up poor. My family always relied on public health care. I know what it's like to feel vulnerable, to trust doctors to take care of us. When I saw people being deceived, people like my mother, my grandmother, I couldn't stay silent." "And you weren't afraid?" "I was. Very afraid. But I also had hope. Hope that there are still good people in medicine like you who care more about patients than money." Michael was moved by Sarah's answer. She had risked everything based on the hope that he would do the right thing. In the following months, life at the hospital changed significantly. The surgery department was restructured, new protocols were implemented, and a culture of transparency and second opinions was established. Michael took on a leadership role in implementing the new protocols. His courage in exposing the irregularities was recognized, and he became a reference for medical ethics within the hospital. Mrs. Eleanor, the first case Sarah had alerted Michael about, was re-evaluated by a medical board. It was confirmed that her surgery had been unnecessary. She was treated clinically, and her pain improved significantly with dietary changes and medication. "Dr. Carter," Mrs. Eleanor said during a follow-up visit, "I don't know how to thank you. If you had gone through with that surgery—" "Mrs. Eleanor, the thanks belong to Sarah. She's the one who warned me." "Then I'll find her to thank her in person." And that's exactly what Eleanor did. She sought out Sarah at the reception desk and, in front of staff and patients alike, thanked her publicly for saving her life. "Sweetheart," Eleanor said, holding Sarah's hands, "you're an angel. God put you in the right place at the right time." Sarah was moved. That recognition meant more to her than any promotion or raise. The story of Michael and Sarah spread throughout the hospital. Employees at all levels began feeling safer about reporting irregularities. A culture of transparency and accountability took root. 6 months later, Mercy General Hospital received an excellent certification in medical ethics. During the award ceremony, Dr. Elizabeth Anderson made sure to mention Michael and Sarah. This recognition wouldn't be possible without the courage of people like Dr. Michael Carter and Sarah Miller, who placed patient well-being above all else. The audience gave a standing ovation. Michael and Sarah sat together in the front row, symbolizing the unlikely partnership that had transformed the hospital. After the ceremony, they talked in the hospital garden. "Doctor, who would have thought that first day when I whispered in your ear would lead to all this?" "Sarah, that was the most important day of my medical career. It was when I learned that medicine isn't just about technical knowledge. It's about courage, ethics, and compassion. And I learned that no matter your position, you can make a difference, even being just a janitor. Sarah, you were never just a janitor. You've always been a person of integrity who cares about others." They fell silent for a moment, watching the hospital's activity, patients coming and going, families waiting for news, doctors and nurses tending to people. "Doctor, there's something I've always wanted to ask." "What?" "That first day when I whispered for you not to do the surgery, what went through your mind?" Michael thought about the question. "Honestly, at first I thought you were crazy. A janitor telling me not to perform surgery? But then I looked into your eyes and saw something I couldn't ignore." "What?" "I saw sincerity, genuine concern, and I realized You had nothing to gain by telling me that. In fact, you had everything to lose. That's what gave me courage, knowing that even if I risked it all, it was the right thing to do. And it was the right thing, Sarah. How many lives did you save? How many unnecessary surgeries were avoided? We saved them, Doctor. It was teamwork. A year later, Michael became head of the surgery department. His first decision was to create an ethics committee with representatives from every hospital department, including janitorial, kitchen, and reception staff. Everyone who works in this hospital interacts with patients, he explained during the committee's first meeting. Everyone can spot irregularities. Everyone can help improve our services. Sarah was chosen to represent administrative staff. In meetings, her unique perspective and ethical sensitivity were always valued. Mercy General Hospital became a model for transparency and medical ethics. Other hospitals adopted similar protocols, and Michael was often invited to speak on medical ethics. At these talks, he always shared how a courageous janitor changed his view of medicine. Medicine, he'd say, isn't a solo profession. It's a collective effort where everyone, regardless of position, can make the difference between life and unnecessary suffering. Sarah, in turn, became an advocate for patient rights. She started a support group for patients' families, teaching them how to question medical procedures and seek second opinions. You have the right to ask questions, she told families. You have the right to understand what's happening to your loved ones. Never be afraid to speak up if something doesn't seem right. 2 years after the incident, Michael and Sarah met monthly for lunch to discuss the hospital's progress. Their friendship, built on mutual respect and shared experience, remained strong. Doctor, sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't spoken up that day. I think about that too, Sarah. How many patients would have suffered unnecessarily? How many families would have been harmed? But I also think about how many people might be in similar situations elsewhere, with no one to stand up for them. That's why our work here matters. We're creating a model that can spread. And it did. Mercy General's story inspired changes across regional hospitals. Ethics protocols were implemented, multidisciplinary committees formed, and a culture of transparency grew throughout the local healthcare system. Michael continued his medical career with a completely transformed perspective. He never made important decisions again without considering multiple opinions, never ignored the voices of employees at any hierarchical level. Sarah, in addition to her work at the hospital, began studying hospital administration at night. Her dream was to become an administrator who could implement transparency and ethics policies in other hospitals. Doctor, she said during one of their monthly lunches, I want to take what we've learned here to other places. I want other hospitals to have committees like ours, where everyone's voice is heard. Sarah, I'm sure you'll succeed. You have the experience, the passion, and the integrity needed. I learned from the best. Actually, Sarah, I was the one who learned from you. You taught me that medicine is about listening, about humility, about recognizing that wisdom can come from anywhere. 5 years after that first encounter in the hallway, Mercy General Hospital had become one of the most respected in the region. Patient satisfaction scores were the highest in the state, and surgical complication rates were among the lowest in the country. During the hospital's 5-year ethics program ceremony, Michael was invited to give a speech. He stepped onto the stage and looked at the audience filled with staff, doctors, nurses, administrators, and patients. 5 years ago, he began, a staff member had the courage to whisper a few words that changed everything. She told me not to perform a surgery, and that whisper turned into a revolution of transparency and ethics. The audience applauded, and Michael searched for Sarah among the faces. She was in the 3rd row wearing her administrator's uniform, tears in her eyes. I learned that day that medicine isn't about hierarchies. It's about collaboration. It's not about ego, it's about humility. It's not about always doing what's most profitable, it's about always doing what's right. The applause was deafening. When it ended, Michael stepped down from the stage and went straight to where Sarah was seated. Thank you, he said, embracing her. Thank you, Doctor, for listening. I'll always listen, Sarah. That's what I learned from you. That evening, they returned to Mrs. Betty's cafe, where they had first talked about the irregularities. The place had become a symbol for them, the spot where it all began. "Mrs. Betty," Michael said as they arrived, "2 cups of the best coffee in the house." "From the way you two changed that hospital," the woman replied with a smile. "The coffee is on the house forever." They sat at the same back table where they had talked years before. "Doctor, there's something I need to confess." "What is it?" "That first day, when I whispered in your ear, I was terrified. My legs were shaking so badly I thought I'd collapse." "But you did it anyway." "Yes, because sometimes doing the right thing is more important than fear." "Sarah, you taught me the greatest lesson of my medical career. That courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what's right, despite the fear." They raised their coffee cups in a toast, celebrating not just their achievements, but the strong friendship that had grown from a single moment of courage. Years passed, and both Michael and Sarah continued their missions to make medicine more ethical and transparent. Michael became a professor of medical ethics at the local university, always telling the story of how a janitor had changed his perspective on medicine. Sarah completed her degree in hospital administration and was hired as a hospital ethics consultant. She traveled across the region, helping hospitals implement transparency protocols. Everywhere she went, she told her story. "I was a janitor," she would say during her talks, "but that didn't mean I couldn't make a difference. Each of you, no matter your position, can be the agent of change a patient needs." Her words inspired staff at every level to become more active in protecting patients' rights. 10 years after the initial incident, Mercy General Hospital held a grand celebration. The ethics program had been adopted by over 50 hospitals in the region, and hundreds of unnecessary surgeries had been prevented. During the event, Michael and Sarah were honored as the founders of the area's hospital transparency movement. "When I look back," Michael said in his speech, "I realize the most important moment of my career wasn't when I graduated or when I got my first job. It was when a courageous person had the humility to whisper a few words that changed everything." Sarah was also invited to speak. "I learned that no matter where you work or what your role is," she said, "you can always choose between complicit silence and transformative courage. I chose courage, and it didn't just change my life, it changed the lives of hundreds of patients." The celebration ended with all hospital staff renewing their pledge to transparency and ethics. It was a symbolic moment, but also a practical one. Every person there committed to being vigilant about patient well-being. 15 years later, when Michael had become a nationally recognized authority in medical ethics, and Sarah had risen to become the ethics director for a hospital network, they still met monthly. "Doctor," Sarah said, "sometimes I wonder what our lives would be like if I hadn't whispered those words that day. We'd probably be living ordinary lives, unaware of the impact we could have on people, but also without the satisfaction of knowing we saved so many lives. Sarah, you taught me that heroism isn't about grand gestures, it's about small acts of courage at the right moment. And you taught me that humility and leadership can go hand in hand." That day, they were celebrating the release of a book they had co-authored. The Whisper That Changed Everything: How One Employee's Courage Transformed Medicine. The book became a bestseller in medical ethics and was adopted in medical schools nationwide. The story of Michael and Sarah inspired a new generation of healthcare professionals to value transparency and collaboration. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing, during one of the book launch talks, a young medical student asked a question that deeply moved Michael. "Professor, how do you stay humble even with national recognition?" Michael glanced at Sarah, seated beside him at the table. "The answer is right here next to me," he said. "Sarah reminds me every day that knowledge without humility is dangerous, that leadership without listening is authoritarian, and that medicine without ethics is just business." A young business student then asked Sarah, "Professor Sarah, how did you find the courage to stand up to such a powerful system?" "It wasn't about finding courage," Sarah replied. "It was about not being able to live with myself if I stayed silent. Sometimes courage isn't a choice. It's the only option that lets you keep looking at yourself in the mirror. After the talk, Michael and Sarah walked across the university campus. "Doctor, have you noticed how much more aware young people are about ethics today?" "Yes, and I think our story played a part in that. We showed that it's possible to make a difference, to challenge corrupt systems, and win. Most importantly, we showed that medicine is a team effort, that all professionals from every field have a responsibility for their patients' well-being." They stopped in front of the medical school building. "Sarah, if you could go back in time, would you do it all over again?" "Without hesitation." "And you?" "I would too. But with one difference." "What?" "I'd listen to you from the very first second, no questions asked. I've learned that when someone risks everything to warn us about something, it's usually because the situation is truly serious." 20 years after the initial incident, Michael had become the dean of the medical university, while Sarah led a national hospital ethics organization. Together, they had transformed not just one hospital, but an entire regional healthcare system. During an interview for a documentary on medical ethics, the reporter asked Michael, "Professor, what was the greatest lesson you've learned in your entire career?" "That medicine is about listening. Listening to patients, listening to colleagues, listening to staff, and especially listening to those with less power in the hierarchy, because they're often the ones who see things most clearly." For Sarah, the question was different. "Dr. Sarah, what advice would you give to someone who sees wrongdoing but is afraid to speak up?" "That fear is natural, but complicit silence is unacceptable, that there's always someone principled willing to listen, and that small acts of courage can lead to great change." The documentary aired nationwide and inspired hundreds of healthcare professionals to implement similar changes in their institutions. 25 years later, when Michael had retired as dean but remained active as a medical ethics consultant, he and Sarah organized a special gathering. They invited all the patients who had benefited from the changes made at Mercy General Hospital. Mrs. Eleanor, now 93, was the guest of honor. "My children," she said, using the affectionate term she always reserved for Michael and Sarah, "you gave me not just more years of life, but years of dignity, and without unnecessary suffering." Also present was Mr. Walter, whose prostate surgery had been cancelled and who had been successfully treated with medication. Mrs. Grace, who avoided unnecessary cataract surgery and still had perfect vision at 80. "You saved dozens of people in this hospital alone," said Dr. Elizabeth, now also retired. "But the model you created saved thousands across the region." During the celebration, Michael and Sarah stepped aside for a private moment. "Sarah, sometimes I still can't believe everything we accomplished." "Doctor, remember what you told me years ago, that small acts of courage can lead to great change?" "I do." "Well, your act of listening to me, even though I was just a janitor, started all this. And your act of whispering those words, even at the risk of your job, saved hundreds of lives." They looked around at the gathering. Patients who had been protected, doctors who had learned to value ethics, staff who had found their voices. "Doctor, there's something I never told you." "What?" "That first day, after I whispered in your ear and walked away, I ran to the bathroom and cried. I cried from fear, from nerves, but also from hope." "Hope?" "Hope that finally someone would do something, that those innocent people wouldn't suffer in vain. And your hope came true, Sarah, more than you could have imagined. Our hope came true, Doctor, because it was teamwork from the very beginning." 30 years after that first whisper in the hospital hallway, Michael and Sarah, now grandparents, met one last time at Mrs. Betty's cafe. The owner had passed away years before, but her children kept the business running and always reserved the back table for them. "Doctor, when I die, I want to be remembered as the janitor who didn't stay silent. Sarah, you'll be remembered as so much more than that. You'll be remembered as the woman who transformed medicine for an entire region. And you'll be remembered as the doctor who had the humility to listen to a janitor. No, Sarah, I'll be remembered as the man who was lucky enough to find a courageous partner who taught me the true meaning of medicine." They rose from the table, embraced for a long moment. and walked together for the last time through the streets of the city they had helped transform. 2 years later, Sarah passed away peacefully at home, surrounded by family. Michael gave the eulogy at her funeral. "Sarah Miller," he said, "taught us that our position in life doesn't matter. What matters is our willingness to do what's right." She whispered a few words that became a cry for justice, echoing for decades. Mercy General Hospital established the Sarah Miller Institute for Hospital Ethics in her honor. Michael oversaw its implementation until his final days. 3 years later, Michael also passed away. Hundreds attended his funeral: doctors, nurses, administrators, patients' families, students. Sarah's son, now a doctor himself, delivered the main speech. "Dr. Carter and my mother taught us that medicine is about unlikely partnerships, about people from different backgrounds joining forces to protect those most in need. They showed us that hierarchies exist, but when it comes to doing what's right, we're all equal." Years passed, but the story of Michael and Sarah continued to inspire new generations. The hospital ethics model they created was adopted nationwide and became an international benchmark. In every medical school across the country, the story of the janitor who whispered to the doctor is told as an example of how multidisciplinary collaboration can transform entire systems. End of story. Now tell us what you thought of Michael and Sarah's story. Do you think Sarah made the right choice by risking everything to protect the patients? Share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other moving stories.